Yo, Baroness. Ludmilla looked up from her brooding to find Chief Ess approaching her with a lazy wave of a claw. The lizard-man lord was accompanied by his usual entourage, which included the ranger in charge of training on wetland terrain, Esries, and a handful of tribal elders. The black-scaled female smacked the chief across the back of his head. "Is that any way to greet your liege?" Esries hissed. "Please forgive him, Lady Zaradnik. The cold is making him stupid." "It does seem a bit late for lizard men to be out and about," Ludmilla said. "We heard that a merchant lord had come to challenge your rule," Chief Ess said. "Are we too late to watch the fight?" "She is already gone," Ludmilla replied. "That quick?" Chief Ess peered at the surroundings. "I don't see any bloodstains." "It was not that sort of challenge," Ludmilla said. "There was no merchant lord, either. She was simply a representative from the merchant guild who came to deliver a set of demands from her organization." Chief Ess scratched his chin, his yellow eyes reflecting the magical illumination of the square. "Oh, how brave of them. What did they ask for?" "Nothing that I could agree to," Ludmilla replied. "Tell me, Chief Ess, how do your people feel about my rule?" "Your rule? Mew, it could be worse, I guess. At first, we thought we would be farmed and eaten like fish, but then we realized that we could live our lives in peace here." As usual, the stereotypically tepid lizard man response did little to stimulate conversation. Ludmilla pursed her lips as she considered how to broach her topic with Chief Ess. The chief put on a confused look. "Wait, I've seen that expression before. Sorry, I don't think it would work between. That is not what it means in this situation," Ludmilla said. "Are you acquainted with any of the Lizardman Alliance members living in Rantel?" The chief sent a sidelong glance to his fellows, who blinked oddly in return. "I think everyone knows someone living there," Chief Ess replied. "Or at least someone who visits the city regularly. Back before we came here, Lord Kokaitis said that they needed some people to live in the city. We had much to thank the Sorcerer King for, so a few of us went." "How did they fare?" "From what I hear, not so well. So far, at least. Lord Mayor was kind enough to fashion them a pond in the middle of the demi-human quarter, but the fact that they had something to remind them of home only made the city feel even more alien, if that makes any sense. Do you have any insights as to why they felt that way?" Chief Ess rubbed the back of his head as he considered her question. "My uncle said that it just never became home, my lady," Esries piped up. "At best, the demi-human quarter is a place where demi-humans are allowed to dwell. Rantel remains a human city with human rules and customs, which is not unreasonable," Chief Ess said. "When one goes the place of another, following their rules is a matter of courtesy. Zaresu said as much to them as he did to us before we came here." "Zaresu? Another of my uncles," Esries told her. "He is a former traveler who has been to many places." "I see," Ludmilla said. "I agree that what he says is a prudent approach for travelers, but your people were invited to make a new home in the city. What measures does the city take to help facilitate that?" "A difficult question," Chief Ess replied. "It is hard to think of any particular thing. Uncle Shazariu says that the humans constantly tell everybody else what to do," Esri said. "Even if the words come from the mouth of an elder lich, one can tell that the city follows human rules. Our people do what they can to follow them, but many are strange and nonsensical. At one point, the humans demanded that we wear shoes outside of the demi-human quarter." "Shoes?" Ludmilla furrowed her brow in confusion. "Why?" "They said that our feet are dirty and we track mud and filth. Our claws scratch up their wooden floors and wagon beds. Some worry that we may injure others. Humans in general didn't react very well to claws and teeth, but..." "Nonna," Ludmilla said, "have there been any reports of lizard men accidentally injuring others with their natural weapons in Warden's Vale?" "No," Nonna replied. "All injuries inflicted by lizard men in Warden's Vale have so far been intentional." Ludmilla nodded to herself, crossing her arms in thought. The insistence on wearing shoes was also partially rooted in past realities. Before the advent of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, Erantle heavily relied on beasts of burden, and being a regional inland trade hub amplified the issues that came with them. The streets could become literal rivers of manure if the city went without rain for too long, and it was never truly a clean place. Lady Albedo's measures to sanitize Erantle, however, should have made related concerns about footwear a thing of the past. Are the other non-human races treated similarly in the city? She asked. Chief Ises exchanged looks with the other lizardmen. All of them responded with negative gestures. That, we cannot say, the chief said. Our kin in the city have only shared their personal experiences. Adapting to life there has many challenges. They don't like the pond, one of the lizardmen behind Chief Ises said. Ah, right, the chief nodded. The non-aquatic races all hate it because it spawns swarms of mosquitoes and flies. The humans say that our control methods are inadequate. What did your people do? Our druids devised a reasonable enough plan. We stocked the pond with fish to eat the larvae and transplanted carnivorous plants from home. Overall, we believe the number of pests is tolerable, but the humans want none at all. On a related note, we expected help from the local bats and birds, but the city had none. Ludmilla furrowed her brow at the claim. She tried to recall the last time she saw a wild bird in the city. To her great confusion, she was pretty sure she hadn't seen one since she and her friends had gone to the Empire. What happened to them? Eaten, probably, Chief Ises seemed to shrug. Meat is expensive. Fish get taken from the pond, as well. The plants we brought in can only survive where there is plenty of water. What did the city administration have to say about it? Ludmilla asked. Nothing. No laws are being broken and the pests seem to improve tax revenues. She turned to level an incredulous look at Nonna. Imports and sales of vermin countermeasures have improved 20-fold. The Elder Leech's tone took on a positive, at least for an Elder Lich, inflection. Lord Mayor's ingenuity has resulted in a graceful synergy between tormenting the population and developing new sources of tax revenue. Some people surely deserve to be tormented, but she couldn't imagine what an entire city could have done to earn the cruel and unusual punishment. The temples should have advised the administration on this, Ludmilla said. Insects of this nature can be a vector for disease. The last thing we need is an epidemic sweeping through the city. Healthcare services in the city are currently under capacity. The revenues gained by minimizing this inefficiency will serve to stimulate the growth of the healthcare sector. Are those the words of His Majesty? Ludmilla asked. It is the determination of the royal court, Nonna answered. In other words, the Sorcerer King hadn't been involved in the discussion. Ludmilla had long learned that the Sorcerer King's vassals and servitors would waste no time saying so if it was the case. I guess this should be expected with a demon in charge. Sounds like a business opportunity to me, Miss Lanez's voice came from somewhere to the side. We can export more of our vermin-repelling magic items and consumables. We'll make a mountain of gold. I think you forgot the part where the guild has embargoed all of our industries, Ludmilla said. Oh, yeah. Oops. Are these guilds truly so powerful, Lady Zaradnik? Chief Ises asked. The way I understand it, they are just merchant tribes, sort of. Merchants can be easily crushed in war. If they attack us, we will destroy them. I doubt they would do anything so foolish, Ludmilla answered. The guilds can only exist when a region is stable enough to allow the establishment of urban centers and the industries that come with them. While it is not unheard of for them to commission assassins and mercenaries, that would only happen if violence was deemed to be the most efficient way to achieve their ends. For the most part, they adhere to local laws and use their economic and political clout to advance their agendas. Chief Ises shifted back a few steps. This is beginning to sound like one of your lectures. I am not about to lecture the entire village on something that they should already know, Ludmilla said. All you need to know for now is that the overall strategy of the guilds will be to make it impossible for us to participate in any market that they hold influence over. But aren't many of your subjects also members of the guilds? They are, Ludmilla said. Or rather, they were. So long as they remain my subjects, the embargo applies to them as well. That being said, how can you be so calm about this? A girl's voice sounded from the crowd. We are all ruined. The murmur of discussion going on between the villagers gathered in the square died. Ludmilla looked over to see who had spoken. Curiously, whoever it was did not speak in the language of Re-Estais or the theocracy. The crowd parted to reveal a child who sent a betrayed look to the people around her. I don't recall receiving any migrants from the Holy Kingdom, Ludmilla said. Construction on the Abelian highway was only half complete, so Ludmilla doubted that the girl had wandered through the wilderness to appear in Warden's Vale. Merchant traffic from the peninsular nation had been non-existent since Yaldabaoth's invasion, so perhaps she was a vagrant who had taken years to wander her way over. Given her apparent age, there was little chance that she could have survived the journey on her own, but there were no nearby adults expressing alarm over her outburst. Why does that matter? The girl fumed. Everyone is going to become poor and starve because you didn't listen to the guild lady. I believe you are overestimating the impact that the guilds have on the local economy. I'm not, the girl told her. The city that I came from is way bigger than the cities around here, so I know how things really work. Evil nobles like you tried to take over and everything burned to the ground. Why are you acting like you're in charge, anyway? Cities belong to the royal family. Cities belong to the crown in the Holy Kingdom, Ludmilla replied, but most urban centers in Re-Estais are both chartered and administered by local houses. This isn't Re-Estais, dummy. It's the Sorceress Kingdom. When my husband comes home, he's going to teach you a lesson. Your husband? He kills bad guys like you. You better eee. A terrified squeal filled the air as Chief Ganzu entered the village square with several of his fellows. The orc chief watched with a confused expression as the girl fled into the night. I can't say I've ever seen a human do that before, Chief Ganzu said. She is from the Holy Kingdom of Roble, Ludmilla told him. Her country was regularly raided by tribes from the Abelian hills in the past. And that means she's scared of me. The orc snorted. How strange. It wasn't as if I was trying to stick her in my mouth. It would be a lie to say that you will not see reactions like that from time to time, Ludmilla said, especially when it comes to people from more insular places. But that is not something you need to worry about, for now. Is there something that you need? We heard that a merchant lord came to challenge you, Chief Ganzu replied. Is the fight already over? Ludmilla's gaze went from the orcs to the lizardmen. Would an army of goblins show up next? A representative of the guilds came to deliver a list of demands, Ludmilla said. I rejected those demands, so, actually, I am curious about something. You visited Rantle with a group of your tribe's artisans. What did you think of the city? It is a busy place, Chief Ganzu replied, though not as busy as the Dale of Defiance back when the Demon Emperor attacked us. The only strange thing was that humans kept approaching me with offers of work. Ah, Chief Issa's tail twitched knowingly. That also happens. What sort of work? Ludmilla asked. Simple things, the orc chief answered. Carrying stuff around. Unloading wagons. Moving goods in and out of storehouses. A few people asked what valuable materials might be found in my territory. In all, they seemed far too interested for people I've never met before. It is their way, Chief Issa said. At least that's what Chief Shazhiryu told me. This also happened to the lizardmen who went to the city. In the city, people have no territory, so they must find other ways to survive. Mostly, this is through trade and manufacturing. The city folk target demi-humans in hopes that they can obtain cheap resources from their lands. Fortunately, Countess Wagner and Baroness Gonnier encouraged each tribe to raise its own merchants, so we are not cheated. Has this happened to you, as well, Lady Zaradnik? Chief Ganzu asked. Yes, Ludmilla sighed at the long series of unpleasant memories that rose in answer to the question. Unfortunately, we did not have any merchants to represent us at the time. I see. Well, at least they aren't specifically targeting non-humans. Oh, but they are, Chief Issess said. They are? They approached you with offers of work because you were the biggest and strongest looking member of your party, Chief Issess said. If all orcs can survive on the same wage, then it is best to employ someone like Dial. But not all work requires raw strength, Ludmilla noted. Do not tell me that they apply the same reasoning to your artisans. The orc and the lizard man exchanged a look. Then I will not tell you, Chief Issess said. Ludmilla narrowed her eyes at his response. The two demi-human lords cautiously backed away. I do not like the sound of this, she said. On a related note, what professions have demi-humans and heteromorphs taken up in the city? They are mostly laborers, Chief Issess said. After that, you have all the merchants bringing goods to the city, followed by the mystics who help manage the population's well-being. A handful of heteromorphs work for the government, but they are the powerful sort like dragons and Naga. What about vocations overseen by the guilds? Ludmilla asked, how many non-human apprentices have been contracted by the workshops around the city? I can't speak for everyone in the city, Chief Issess said, but none of Shazhiriu's people are with any of the craft guilds. Then how do they make a living? Some came to hone their combat skills against the Adventurer Guild, which covers their expenses. Others work for the Lizard Man merchants who go back and forth between the city and the Great Lake. There is no room to raise a family in the city, so they leave their mates and hatchlings at home. If you were a lizard man looking to make a new life in the city, Ludmilla asked, what would you do? If you mean in Rantel, the lizard man chief answered, my only choice aside from what I mentioned would be to take the work that the humans offer. Being a dock worker in Korlin Harbor would probably be best. It's on the water and only a short ride from the city. This is not good. Ludmilla muttered. But I studied so hard. There is nothing wrong with your answer, Ludmilla told Chief Issess. The problem is what your answer implies. Her eyes went from the lizard men to the orcs beside them, then to the human villagers assembled around her. How things worked in her fief had blinded her to the reality of the situation elsewhere. His Majesty the Sorcerer King encourages us to do the things that we are good at, both in terms of individual and racial aptitudes. This confrontation with the guilds and the accounts of life in the city has led me to identify an issue with His Majesty's mandate. There can be no issue with our master's mandates, Nonna immediately told her. The issue is in its interpretation, Ludmilla said. This affects how the mandate is implemented and its consequences. How things work in Warden's Vale is quite different from what is happening in Rantel. How complicated can it be? Chief Ganzu said, if one is good at hunting, then they hunt. If one has a talent for fashioning fine leather equipment, then they do that. Is this wrong? I believe most of us here see it that way, Ludmilla replied. Then what's the problem? The problem is that, in the common human culture of Rantel, there is the notion that some people are worth more than others by virtue of their vocation. That's preposterous. The orc chief snorted. Hunters and warriors may contend with one another for rank, but what purpose is there for one to stand above or below a mystic or artisan? Everyone is doing something essential for the survival of the tribe, or they wouldn't be doing it. Simply put, it is decadence, Ludmilla said. In what form it manifests depends on the situation. The people of Re-Estais and the Empire have enjoyed nearly 2 centuries of undeserved peace due to the protection of a greater power. Instead of collectively honing themselves to survive the challenges that the world might throw at them, they have developed a complex web of hierarchies that reflect their society's realities and jockey for position within it. Sooner or later, however, those realities are proven to be delusions, often to the woe of the deluded. Much like the societies of the wilderness tribes, those rooted in the faith of the Six had a survival-oriented outlook on life. Up until recently, it concerned itself with the survival of humanity in a hostile world, imploring its faithful to do their part in preventing its extinction. There was little tolerance for decadence and corruption as a result. What does that have to do with being offered work? Chief Gan Zhu asked. It represents two aspects of their society rolled into one, Ludmilla answered. The first is that tribal demi-humans are seen as savage brutes. In other words, these offers of employment are made with the idea that you are little more than intelligent beasts of burden. By the same token, the idea that tribal demi-humans may be able to qualify for positions as skilled labor will never cross their minds. The second thing is the web of hierarchies that I mentioned. In the city, common laborers sit at the bottom of everything. They are considered little more than paupers and vagrants with temporary employment. No guild represents their interests and no one cares if they live or die, only that they serve at the convenience of the established members of society. They are an expendable and self-replenishing resource. Chief Gan Zhu still didn't seem to understand what she was saying. Chief Ises, however, lashed his tail over the ground. That's messed up, he said. Are we to be nothing more than outcasts? Not if I have anything to say about it, Ludmilla replied. This goes beyond the guilds, so it will take a lot of time and effort to push back. Wait, Chief Gan Zhu said. I'm still trying to digest your words here. How can the humans have so much influence in the Sorceress Kingdom? I doubt that it is an exclusively human phenomenon, Ludmilla said. It just happens to be what drives this particular scenario. His Majesty the Sorcerer King mandated that each individual should pursue vocations that they have aptitudes for, but human perception of demi-humans is limited to threat assessments and human-centric folklore. Because humans control the majority of industry in the Sorceress Kingdom, they end up dictating how one may participate in the economy and society at large. So, because common laborers have such a miserable standing among humans, the Orc chief crossed his massive arms. The same standing is applied to demi-humans who are only offered work as common laborers. Yes, Ludmilla nodded. Demi-humans will be painted with a pre-established social stigma. Combined with the common perception of tribal demi-humans, that stigma may be amplified to even greater levels. The longer this goes on, the more these views will entrench themselves. You will be seen as brutes that provide relatively cheap menial labor until the supply of undead labor catches up with demand. Once that happens, they will not care what becomes of you. Chief Ises is right, Chief Gan Zhu said grimly. This is messed up. How do we fight it? The answer is fairly obvious, Ludmilla said. Getting to the answer is another matter entirely. We are not without our advantages, however, and the guild embargo may actually be a blessing in disguise. Indeed, her visit to the Great Tomb of Nazarick and her discussions with the Sorcerer King and his vassals seemed to serve as a primer for what she and her people now faced. While her trip at first appeared to be the result of an innocent invitation to visit with Lady Shiltir, one would be a fool to believe that a god did anything for such shallow and simplistic reasons. His Majesty extended his invitation all the way back when we were exploring the Katsa Plains. How many of these nascent social issues might have been averted had I taken him up on his offer as soon as we returned? Though the Sorceress Kingdom had become the new abode of the God of Justice, it was far from a just place. Even so, one could say that it was also the ideal place to explore how true justice might be achieved. Rather than being considered an obstacle to progress, her confrontation with the guilds was a catalyst for meaningful reform. The Sorceress Kingdom had no need for antiquated systems that did not carry out the will of its sovereign or serve the needs of his subjects. This is probably too much to go over in one sitting, Ludmilla said, but I intend to use this conflict with the guilds to help develop better systems than what we currently have. I won't pretend to know what you're thinking, my lady, Miss Lanez said, but we're tiny. We barely have any economic or political clout. How can we bring about change if no one believes we're worth listening to? Many heads in the crowd nodded in agreement. As people who were brought up under the guild system, it was understandable that they had difficulty envisioning a world without it and shared many of its blind spots. As someone who mostly lived outside of that system for her entire life, however, Ludmilla saw plenty of ready solutions. What they believe will not matter, Ludmilla said. Bring some tables together. Let us first develop a clear picture of each company's current situation and their concerns going forward. She called for the Faculty of Alchemy to speak first. As with the other companies, all of its members residing in the village had been drawn by the appearance of Miss Hoffman and her delivery of the guild's ultimatum. The near future of our alchemical production is probably of the least concern, Ludmilla said. The vast majority of our exports are purchased directly by the Imperial Army, and our artificers are still many years away from achieving the throughput to satisfy local demand. Are there any critical concerns that anyone would like to bring to my attention? Yeah, Miss Lernez said. The embargo applies to imports, as well. Never mind taking years to catch up with local demand for magic items, we won't be able to make those magic items at all without a new source of materials. That is true, Ludmilla said. This is not a guarantee by any measure, but I would like to conduct a trade expedition of sorts. What would your party require in terms of staff? Aside from merchants, we'd need experts who can identify and analyze stuff. Being able to bring equipment would help. I believe that can be arranged. You having all the companies go, milady? Someone asked. Yes, that is the plan, Ludmilla replied. Some of our destinations are rather distant, so please plan accordingly. Chief Ises, Chief Ganzu, prepare your delegations, as well. For perhaps the fifth time that evening, the two demi-human lords exchanged a confused look. Us? Chief Ises asked. Oh, yes, Ludmilla smiled slightly, you are coming too, what the? Standing on the westernmost berth of Corlin Harbour, Leanne watched as a motley assortment of passengers disembarked from the recently arrived barge from Warden's Vale. They were a provincial-looking lot, at least if provincial included counting orcs, lizardmen, and goblins amongst their number. Even more strange was that they were all adorned in the same fashion, which consisted of simple, serviceable clothing, thick-soled boots, and a plain leather satchel slung over the shoulder. Depending on their profession, shawls, headscarves, or wide-brimmed straw hats covered each passenger's head. Bringing up the rear of the procession coming down the boarding ladder was Ludmilla, who wore the usual equestrian outfit that had been granted to her by Lady Shaltir. She walked toward Leanne and Clara in an imperceptibly menacing way, her face an unreadable mask. Leanne took a step back as Ludmilla closed on them, which annoyed Leanne far more than she expected. Is this an invasion? Leanne asked. A rogue attack? An amphibious assault, Ludmilla corrected her. And no. There would be far more lizardmen with me if it was. Then why all the people? They just visiting town? No, Ludmilla replied. We are bringing them with us. What? I may have done a thing that led to another thing that led to this being necessary, the towering martial noble said. All right, Leanne said. When you kinda start sounding like me, I know you did a thing. What happened? Clara asked. Ludmilla's gaze wandered their surroundings as if scanning for unseen threats. Then, she took a step closer. When I got home last night, Miss Hoffman was in the village square. You know, if you were going to use this, what was the point of all that just now? Why was she in Warden's Vale? The guilds discovered what I was doing and they did not like any of it. Miss Hoffman delivered a list of unreasonable demands, which I naturally refused. Leanne exchanged a look with Clara. Given how Ludmilla interpreted the world around her, unreasonable demands could have meant anything. Could you be a little more specific? The industries in Warden's Vale have grown significant enough for them to decide that the guilds should determine how things work. They seem to especially dislike the threat that our industrial production poses to their members and want to regulate everything from marriage to education. That's pretty normal as far as the guilds go. Yes, well, they see fit to apply their normal to just me and not you too. Probably because you stink at negotiating. I bet you listened to Miss Hoffman rattle off their demands, said I, and then kicked her into the river. Ludmilla silently glowered at Leanne in response. She had probably hit the mark. Well, Clara said, even if that is the case, it should hardly affect your territory. If anything, It hurts the rest of the duchy as you are by far a net exporter of raw materials. The other nobles will be happy about some of their competition being knocked out for now, Liane said. They probably won't be in a couple of years, though. That depends, Clara said. How do you plan on fighting the guilds? By removing them from existence, preferably, Ludmilla replied. Your plan to transition the guilds out of their self-declared position of authority has clearly not had any effect on how they operate presently. Since they picked a fight with me, I intend to get the most out of it. I dunno if the royal court will be happy about merchants being barred from using the Abelian highway, Liane said. Wait a minute, don't tell me you're going to bar our merchants, too. An evil smile broke out on the evil frontier noble's evil face. I hate you, Liane muttered. We will have plenty of time to discuss this later, Clara said. For now, we need to sort out all of these passengers. Florine should be arriving soon, as well. My people already have leaders organizing their respective groups, Ludmilla said. The both of you have already met Chief Ises. Dal Ganzu is the chief of the Orc clan living in my territory, he's the tallest one standing over there. Miss Gran is with the goblins? Liane's gaze went to the blonde Imperial Scion standing in front of a column of the little green demi-humans. They looked more like a captain with her company than members of a trade delegation. Doesn't Nemel have a bunch of human settlers to represent? Liane asked. Warden's Vale's industries are more than enough to fulfill their needs, Ludmilla answered. I had Miss Gran come along for the experience. She is quite adept when it comes to relations with other races. The goblins living under her management insisted on providing her with an escort. She'd have done better with some household staff. Goblin maids. There was money to be made in that idea somewhere, but she couldn't think of anything offhand. I just hope we can secure accommodations for everyone, Clara said. Florine said that she will be bringing a few people, as well. And here I was hoping it would be just us going, Liane grumbled. When's the last time it's been just us? The last time Lady Shiltir, AHH. Forget I asked. Do you not think that having more than just us in the delegation would better represent the Sorcerer's Kingdom as a whole? Clara asked, if we continued as we have, people would start wondering if humans ruled here. We certainly pull more weight on this end of things, Liane said. Which must change eventually, Clara told her. It is unreasonable to think otherwise. A strange bird call drew their attention to the familiar void of a gate spell opening over the pavement a dozen meters away. Florine emerged from the portal cradling her nasty little beastman cub. Accompanying her was what appeared to be a cross between a slug and a bug. Lady Shiltir and a pair of vampire brides emerged behind them. Their liege bore a pleased expression as her gaze lingered on Liane and her friends. Good morning, Lady Shiltir, Clara said as they curtsied in unison. I hope the morning finds you well. It would have been much better if that gorilla hadn't decided to send you away the very moment I had some time to enjoy myself, Lady Shiltir sighed. Their liege perked up slightly as Ludmilla produced a preservation bottle from her infinite haversack. You will have to make do with this until we can attend to you properly, my lady, Ludmilla said as she offered her blood to the vampire. Hopefully, things will proceed smoothly. Liane absently rummaged around in her bag for the blood that she had collected over the past few weeks. As she did, she frowned up at the top of Florine's head. What happened to your hair? Liane asked. Do you wrestle with demi-humans on an hourly basis? Wait, did it just move on its own? Something is foraging for parasites in her hair, Ludmilla offered helpfully. Clara rushed over to hide behind Ludmilla. Liane leapt back several meters, brushing off her dress in a panic. I don't have any parasites. Florine protested. This is Leolio, one of the people I said I'd be bringing along. Pip. A bird thing with long brown tail feathers appeared atop Florine. Florine gestured to the bluish slug bug thing with her free hand. This is Boobibi, a representative of the Xian. Both have accompanied me for the last few months. Boobibi bobbed her eel-like head, holding her 4 claws together like a mantis rather than a human. Liane couldn't read the Xian's expression at all. After collecting their blood and inspecting the last of the bottles with a satisfied nod, Lady Shaltier opened a new gate. Oraculon, yes. Lady Shaltier said, the girls working at the exclave said that the old landing was no good, so you'll emerge near the gate to the city. Thank you, my lady. Ludmilla stepped through the portal first. They ushered the assembled delegates through before going in themselves. The balmy climate of the Draconic Kingdom welcomed them on the other side of the gate, complete with its sapphire blue sky. Leolio pipped and fluffed his feathers. I don't get how this place can be so nice at this time of the year, Liane said. We are not that far away. Dame Verilyn said something about the warm currents of the Cerulean Way and the influence of the nearby deserts being the cause, Ludmilla said. The Draconic Kingdom was founded here precisely because it is perfect for human habitation. And the jungle next door is perfect for a bunch of people that eat humans, Liane said. How convenient. Lady Zaradnik, Nemel Gran approached them from where she had left her goblins in a nearby empty lot. She was dressed as an imperial noblewoman, though that was probably because Warden's Vale was something like the opposite of a center of fashion. Ludmilla turned to look at her with a question on her face. Are we staying here for long? Nemel asked, if so, where do we find accommodations? This entire place is filled with cargo containers. Liane eyed the rows of metal boxes stacked up around them. They had been careful to raise the land well above the high water mark, but the river had risen past it and now half of the district was submerged. It was a good thing that they were still in the middle of landscaping when it happened. What does our itinerary look like, Corlin? Ludmilla asked. Our convoy will finish arriving by midday, Clara replied. We have dinner with Queen Auriculus this evening. The time of our departure will be determined by our discussion with Her Majesty. It sounds like we will be sleeping on the ships, Ludmilla told Nemel. In the meantime, I suppose we should get everyone acquainted. Clara took Ludmilla's elbow as they were encircled by an assortment of different races. The most concerning looking of the bunch was the slug-bug thing beside Florine. Even the burly orcs that Ludmilla had brought along gave the thing a wide berth. I take it that you are acquainted with one another? Ludmilla asked. That one is a Xian, the largest orc answered. They've been the scourge of the northern tribes since times beyond recollection. We are all on the same side now, Florine said with a gentle smile. I don't mean to trivialize the history between your people, but I believe that it would be for the best if everyone joined hands to build a prosperous future. The members of the assembly responded with silence, though they seemed more clueless as to how to reply to Florine's entreaty than unreceptive of her words. As Florine went on to coordinate an introduction between everyone, Clara's fearful look turned thoughtful. I think this is a good opportunity. A good opportunity for what? Something like an informal primer on government, perhaps? We have made next to no progress on incorporating the tribes into the House of Lords. So you want to help each tribe define its interests in the context of trade? Do they even understand trade in the first place? The history of trade in the Abelian Hills stretches farther back than the history of Riastais. You'll have no problems on my end. The Ganzu tribe was originally from the Abelian Hills and you already know the lizardmen. Liane lightly drummed her fingers against her thigh. Was it a good idea? The original assumption for political participation in the Sorcerous Kingdom was that the tribes, or at least the major tribes, would eventually send representatives to sit in the House of Lords. Presumably, this would help hammer out legislation that would gradually reform the Sorcerous Kingdom from a country that used a framework of human laws, customs, and perspectives into something that worked for its many member races. What that something was they had no idea about, since the original assumption fell flat on its face. For the most part, the tribes were content with their current state of affairs. They were promised prosperity in exchange for fealty, and no one had to worry about being raided and eaten anymore. Additionally, pretty much everyone in the region, humans included, had a fundamentally insular worldview, so they had no motivation to participate in foreign politics unless a specific issue directly affected them. In theory, this might be a good idea, But is it actually? The last thing we need is these guys fighting one another over something that they all want. At this level, I doubt that there's anything so rare or limited that your fears would come to pass. Rolengork is so huge that a handful of our tribes should have a negligible impact on its economy. Fine. But don't blame me if they start eating each other's faces in half an hour. Florine rolled her eyes. They made their way over to the only relatively clear spot in the exclave, a hill upon which several saplings had been transplanted. At the top of the hill was a small pond that fed a shallow brook which wound its way down through the district on its way to the river. At some point, they were supposed to hire a handful of druids to tend to the local greenery, but development in general had been postponed by the ongoing flooding. "Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to participate in our discourse," Clara said after everyone had picked out their spots. "With how sudden this seems to be for everyone, I thought it best to take the time to sort ourselves out before continuing onto the next leg of our journey. Our convoy is ostensibly a trade delegation, so I would like to begin by having each tribe or individual identify the things that they would be interested in importing." Clara shifted uncomfortably as her opening address was met with blank stares. Something stirred at Lian's side. "Zushiru. Holy crap." Lian leapt up in fright. "Where the hell did you come from?" Zushiru saw many people, so Zushiru came over. "You still work in those futures contracts?" Lian asked. The Quagoa merchant responded with a human-like nod. "The profits are steady, but boring. Some of Zushiru's disciples will take over soon." "In that case, you got good timing. What did you want again?" "Zushiru would like to see what ores are being offered. There are many mines in the Draconic Kingdom, but most of what they produce is common." "And the ore goes toward feeding your people, right?" "The finest ores are for the clan," Zushiru replied. "The humans are more than happy to purchase everything else." "What do you do with your profits?" "Expanding the company. These days, many males in the clan desire the prestige of being a merchant." "The prestige of being a merchant, huh? That wasn't something one ever heard in human society. To the vast majority, one made an honest living through their land, working as an artisan in a workshop, or performing menial labor. By their logic, merchants used unscrupulous and dishonest means to get by. The more successful the merchant, the greater of a no-good scoundrel they were. Even merchants themselves worked to achieve ultimate goals like owning property in the city or, if they were extraordinarily successful and lucky, purchasing an aristocratic title. Zushiru, on the other hand, was seen as a sort of hero by his clan. He was the main breadwinner, or was that all winner? In what the Quagoa considered a desolate wasteland, and many of his clansmen sought to emulate him. Then again, it was still early in his career. Maybe the ideal retirement for Zushiru was buying a mountain somewhere to live under. "Does that serve as a clear enough example?" Clara asked the assembled tribespeople. Several seconds of silence fell over the gathering. Chief Ganzu cleared his throat. "So," the orc chief said, "this, Armat? Quagoa. This Quagoa must conduct trade to provide for his people. But my people are not in the same situation. Our land is more than enough to comfortably sustain us." "We are in the same position," Chief Ises said. "The territory granted to my tribe is enough to support many generations of growth. Lady Zaradnik encourages us to participate in trade, but our war with the guild seems to mean that our merchants will stick to local operations." "War with whom?" Florine frowned. "It is a long story," Ludmilla said. "Well, maybe not so long. The guild tried to impose its authority on Warden's Vale. I rejected their demands." "That's quite the shock," Florine blinked. "Given your reputation, I figured they would leave well enough alone. Why would they risk so much for so little? I suppose they thought they could play the same game that they do in every urban center." "That is not the only reason," Clara said. "The guilds are confident that their champion will protect them." "Their champion?" "Moman the Black," Clara said. Ludmilla scoffed. "That is ridiculous. a seated member of the royal court defending the guilds from a servant of the crown. Clara shrugged in response. To the people of Rantel, Momen is what keeps the Sorcerer King from razing the city to the ground and slaughtering its citizens. You should see how much they panic whenever they discover or even suspect that he is absent. As members of the aristocratic establishment govern on behalf of His Majesty, the guilds would reason that Momen will also protect them from you. They should ask the people of Facet County how that worked out for them, Leanne said. We all saw how it was there, Clara said. No one was very fond of House Facet or its subjects. Most were fine with interpreting what happened there as evil turning upon evil. Unlike their entirely innocent selves, Ludmilla grumbled. That's just how it is, Florine said. In the city, the guilds dictate right and wrong just as much as the temples do. They consider themselves the keepers of civilized society, after all. She wasn't wrong. The guilds truly believed that everything that they did was in the best interests of civilization. They established their seats of power in every major economic center, which gave them a disproportionate amount of de facto influence. What Ludmilla saw as illegitimate interference in her fief's affairs, the guilds considered their rightful duty to urban society. Historically, no one messed with the guilds because they could hold an entire country's economy hostage. I'm pretty sure the guilds just think they'll flat out win, Leanne said. In their minds, Momen's on their side if you try resorting to violence. You're pretty much a non-factor in everything else. That's right, Florine said. From their standpoint, your territory is just a source of raw resources with minimal economic clout. I wouldn't be surprised if they also believe that the royal court will back them, since the only thing they seem to want the citizens to do is follow the rules and generate revenue. Yeah, Leanne nodded. You are basically a puppy waiting to be kicked. Hey, where are you going? Ludmilla looked over her shoulder with a pout. Finding an empty container to sulk in, she said. Clara went and brought Ludmilla back to their place in the circle. Your fief is literally designed to withstand sieges, Clara told her. Trade embargoes do not do nearly as much to Warden's Vale as they believe it will. The guilds frame this conflict as a rural aristocrat trying to infringe on their jurisdiction by chartering a new urban center without their blessing. Since you never communicate with the guilds beyond official paperwork, they have no clue that you have an entirely different worldview from theirs. You mentioned that you plan to take full advantage of this. What are you going to do? Accelerate our society's transition away from the guild system, I suppose, Ludmilla replied. Just as importantly, what I do will hopefully shift the Sorcerer's Kingdom away from its human-centric starting point. Just in case you didn't notice, Leanne said, that's already something we've been doing. I know, Ludmilla said, but some highly problematic issues have been evolving while that happens. Such as the economic and social marginalization of the vast majority of the Sorcerer's Kingdom's population? Clara said. You have no idea how annoying your ability to instantly figure out things that take me forever to realize is, Ludmilla muttered. Well, Clara smiled, you said evolved, so it was easy to deduce from there. Easy my ass, Leanne said. Also, things have always been like that. Why make a huge fuss out of it now? Because of the evolution that I mentioned, Ludmilla told her. Human society tends to order itself by wealth and vocation. The Sorcerer's Kingdom is undergoing a transition wherein human labor is making the shift towards artisanal professions. At the same time, human perceptions of the local tribes categorize them as savage brutes with little value beyond their use as menial labor or a way to deliver previously untapped resources to the cities. I see, Florine said. So you're saying that if things are allowed to remain as they are, non-humans will be relegated to the lowest rungs of society. But do they even care? Leanne said, just going by what your two chiefs said, they're content with what they have. They have no need for the rest of society. You misunderstand us, Chief Esses took a step forward. What we said is that our lands are sufficient to sustain our people, so we do not need to trade for our survival. That does not mean we wish to live in isolation. That's right, Chief Ganzu said. Baroness Zaradnik told us that she wishes to have all of her subjects become members of the greater community that she is building in her territory, and nothing my people have witnessed suggests that she does not mean what she says. By comparison, these guilds insist on forcing everyone to become one of them. Those who do not are targets to be exploited according to rules that the guilds fashion for their own benefit. In our opinion, this is worse than being raided. At least those being raided are allowed to defend themselves. Liane raised her hands disarmingly. Fine, I get it. But what's your strategy here? The guilds have practically locked you into your territory. That is what they believe, Ludmilla said. In reality, the way that they weigh and measure the world around them has left them blind to reality. Gonye, have the guilds sent any representatives to the Abelian Hills? No. Oh, you've got to be kidding, Em. Why is that? Ludmilla asked. More of the Sorceress Kingdom's citizens dwell there than in the Duchy of Evrantel. Florian sighed. Because the Abelian Hills have no economic significance. If things are left as they are, how long do you think it will take for the guilds to spread civilization to the Abelian Hills? Even if our citizens want it, I can't see it ever happening unless someone forces the issue. Our history suggests that the tribes living there are a threat to human civilization, and the guilds will base their assessments on that. The Abelian Highway will only be recognized for the economic potential that direct access to the Western Ocean represents. So your plan is to create an adjacent economy, Clara said. Yes, Ludmilla replied. Not only with the people of the Abelian Hills, but also with any population being overlooked by the guilds. His Majesty desires prosperity for all of his subjects. The machinations of the guilds only lead to the creation of a class of urban elites who consider the world beyond their walls as a source of resources to be exploited. It is clear to me that the guilds must be ousted as quickly as is reasonable. I agree, Florian said. There is no reason why any of the Sorceress Kingdom's citizens should suffer this sort of treatment. The beneficial aspects of the guild system are not necessarily exclusive to the guilds. In fact, regulation and representation are much better handled by our officials. Liane's gaze moved back and forth between her friends as they discussed their new war plan. She didn't care how things played out either way, but... Don't you think you're trying to move things a little too fast? Liane asked. How about letting the guilds know what they're doing wrong and let them correct the problem? Ludmilla tilted her head, bestowing a confused look upon Liane. I believe that is the silliest thing I have ever heard from you, my dear Lady Wagner, she said. Why would I interrupt an enemy who is in the midst of making a mistake?